If you've ever thought about starting your own podcast, you clicked on the right episode. Today, I'm sitting down with Mustafa. Over $20 million in real estate investments over the last 5 years, but that is just the beginning. We're not talking about the real estate career, we're talking about his podcast. Can you have success in something else and apply that to podcasting? How does it actually work? How does he set up his team? How much time does his podcast take? How much money does he make from it? And the golden question, was it worth it? Over 1 year of episodes, 50 plus episodes, interviews, solo, hundreds of short form clips on social media. How did he actually get people to listen to this podcast? And how can you copy exactly what he did for your own podcast while not making any of the mistakes that he made along the way? This episode dives into all of it. So if you're ever thinking about starting your own podcast, you're already on the right episode. Don't miss this one with our client and friend, Mustafa, diving in to everything relating to starting your podcast and answering that golden question, was it worth it? I'm Ryan from Podcast Principles. Let's dive in. Mustafa, thank you so much for being here.
No, it's a pleasure, Ryan. Thanks for inviting me on.
Anytime. So let's start with the first question, the best question. Why do you have / why did you start a podcast?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I mean, fundamentally for me, everything I do is really built around helping people. And the question is, how do you help people? Do you help people the way that you want to, the way that's organic to you, the way that makes sense? Or do you help people in line with the way they want to be helped? I'm a very private person, Ryan. I really don't like having a public-facing image or anything like that. I'm quite active on LinkedIn. Now I'm active on YouTube, Apple Podcasts. I don't even know where else I'm active. I'm active on all these other platforms. And the reason is because I want to be able to help people, and I want to be able to help people with financial literacy on their own terms. Like a lot of times for people, they don't know what they don't know. They're paying too much in taxes. Their wealth isn't growing. They don't know why. And so I created a podcast form to talk about financial literacy in very indirect ways, to talk to people who are very good at what they do, and to, peel back a couple layers to really say, hey, this person is really good at what they do. How do they think about money? What can we learn about them from a money mindset perspective? What can we learn from them in relation to the clients that they serve and their outlook on money? Because ultimately the point of the podcast and the point of my Fin journey is to really help you on your financial journey. But part of that is to really focus on the soft skills. And the problem here, Ryan, is that a lot of times when you're starting out, you just want to make money. And you don't realize that the soft skills are that foundation. And if you have a strong foundation, you can aggressively scale. Then you talk to the people that have aggressively scaled and are doing really well, and they'll talk about mindset. They'll talk about all of these different things that feel like fluff. But that fluff is what enabled them to be successful. So that's why I started the podcast, Ryan, to really talk to people about the fluff, about the mindset, about the foundation, to then ultimately say like, hey, if you're making a lot of money, you can talk to me about real estate, you can talk to me about investing, but we really don't go into that on the podcast. We go into like the basic steps that, 80% plus of people really need to focus on.
So there's so much there. We're going to get into it. We're going to get into the podcast, but we're going to talk about podcasting for a few minutes. People have said this forever. Podcasting is saturated. There's so many podcasts. In your case, there's so many podcasts about finance. There's so many podcasts about real estate. Was that a thought in your mind when you were starting of, oh, maybe there's too many, I shouldn't, start my own? Or, what was your mindset around / did you even think about the other podcasts that were out there, when you were putting yours together?
I think that's a great question, Ryan. Fundamentally, especially in 2026, there's so many voices on the internet. There's so many personalities, and a lot of them are quite loud. For me, I never thought about how loud other people were or whether, my voice mattered or anything like that. For me, it started with like, do I have the time for this? And I didn't have the time. So it was like, how am I going to buy the time, create the time, build a team to find the time, etc. That was my first concern, creating time. The second concern is like, am I genuinely adding value for people? I'm one of those guys. I'm pretty quiet. I don't like shout that loud, etc. I don't have a loud, personality or presence on social media, in my opinion. And I think I have to some degree like imposter syndrome. So I think the second concern there is like, am I actually creating value for people? The third concern was more of a realization of a gap in the market. People who look like me, have my perspective on life, etc. I don't really see them on any of these forms or formats, online, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on having a podcast, etc. And I was kind of tired of waiting for that person to show up. It was like 5 years or so I was waiting for that person. They never showed up, and I could understand why. Because it's, it's more comfortable to be a private person rather than show up every week and drop episodes, etc. And have people talk to you about your episode in a way that feels like uncomfortable, even though they have like a fanboy crush on you. For me, that lands as like, I feel uncomfortable. But the point of the podcast is to genuinely help people. And part of that is for me to be comfortable being uncomfortable. So that's part of what I work on, Ryan, is just getting 1% better along the way. And like role modeling good behavior. Financial literacy is all about continuing to learn and grow. And if I'm not doing that, how can I expect people to do that?
Were there any podcasts that you did emulate or take notes from or look towards as, oh, I would like it to be like this? Or did you instead do the opposite where you're like, let's just build this from scratch how I envision it to be?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Ryan. I think the problem to some degree, when I talk to my staff, the problem to some degree is like I have too many newsletters, I'm learning too many different things, I'm trying too many different things, and it can feel like we're growing in different directions. There's loads of people that are creating amazing content, and I'll name drop them just so that people can check them out. There's Ali Abdal, he's great. His podcast or his content is very different from mine, in my humble opinion, because it's him sitting in front of a camera, talking to the camera. I'm not at that point where I can do that yet, and it feels good enough for me to feel comfortable, etc. Instead, I went down the route of like interviewing, maybe like how Patrick Bet-David started. His interview style, his questions are very different from mine. And then there's maybe Alex Hormozi that does maybe both. To me, Ryan, fundamentally, I wanted a podcast that focused on financial literacy, focused on mindset, focused on growth. There are a couple different podcasts that do that, but I think everybody does it in a different way with a different flavor. There's Graham Stephan as well that does it. And I would say like in that Graham Stephan example, it starts out with like saving enough money, like not spending money on buying iced coffee. And that launches his own show, Iced Coffee Hour, where he has more of a podcast type setup. For me, Ryan, I think I can't point to one podcaster who like I modeled my podcasting around, but what I can say is one of those things that I take what I perceive to be the good and what I perceive to be the bad from everybody to create content that is, representative of the values that I bring to the table, while also saying that there's so many ways to learn and grow. And for people watching the episodes, it's important that there's a takeaway for them to actually implement in their lives to help them get 1% better. So that's really what I focus on.
Yeah. And, we see this. What I see is there's almost nothing you can take from what I would call the bigs, right? Those big channels, those big podcasts. Almost nothing. There is the good you can take, right? The how they got there. Sure. Right? That journey, I think there's notes to be taken. As to, I'm going to go emulate that. I mean, as we've seen with most of these shows, they just become a political news show, which is just, that's what gets us the most views. PBD is political news. Diary of a CEO is political news.
When did that happen? Especially with PBD. Diary of a CEO, I haven't noticed that.
PBD, it happened when he sold.
And that's for Patrick Bet-David, for somebody who doesn't know.
That happened when he sold his company. Now, he stayed on as an advisor, as the marketing arm of the company, right? Okay. So he has to get more views now. Whereas before, Valuetainment, we're just educating and adding value because I'm the CEO. But now when you become just the figurehead, you don't have to add value anymore. You can just entertain, right?
Interesting.
So that's the nuance.
When did he sell?
Yeah.
I didn't even realize he did sell.
It was like a few years ago.
Oh wow,
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. And I'm not against it. By the way, plug. I did a deep dive on it. If for anybody listening and watching, I did a full episode on it. All these details. But what I'm saying is, back to your point, there is notes to be taken as to, well, they do their thumbnails in this way, or maybe they format their episodes in this way, or wow, I watched the whole trailer and now I'm in the episode. These are the things you want to take notes on, the details, right? Not let me emulate the whole thing, right? And to your point. So let's stay on your podcast for a second more.
Sure.
Guests, right? Not everybody does guests. I do solo, I do guests like I'm doing right now, and I do co-hosted with Jack, right? So I do all three. I have clients who only do solo. I have clients who only do co-host. I have clients who only do guest. Why did, and I think you touched on it a little bit, but let's go a little bit deeper. Why did you choose to interview people on your podcast? And why, if you do think, why is that the best format, at least for you?
I don't think there is a best format for people. I think for me, to some degree, it's to play to my strengths. Right, I'm coming from a place where I don't want to do this subconsciously and psychologically. I don't feel comfortable, and I just need to show up and put in the reps to get comfortable. It's like the person who, wants to go to the gym and recognizes the value of going to the gym, but can't get himself to the gym. Maybe you start with a trainer, and you're like, hey, this is really expensive, or hey, I really like my trainer. However, you're going to like psychologically trick yourself to make success inevitable. So for me, to some degree, it's, hey, I recognize that I create a lot of value based on the feedback that they give me. So that's textbook imposter syndrome. And I recognize that I have that and I talk about it, etc. But that's very different than I am amazing, which is maybe like a different like mental model. So for me, the process of starting a podcast is much easier if I interview people. Now, if I'm interviewing somebody and he's accomplished much less than me, that's fine. Because that person is on the podcast and that person is amazing. I'm going to showcase how they're amazing, and I'm going to find different ways to learn and grow from that person, just like we were doing before we started recording, right? I was asking you questions about like my podcast setup, etc. So for me, Ryan, because I'm like an insatiably hungry when it comes to like learning and growing, that shows up on the podcast. There was a podcast I dropped, last week, where every single question, the interviewee is like, "That's an amazing question." And when people give me compliments, I don't really believe them. So I'm like, why is she complimenting me? But at some point, when most podcast guests get on your show and they're saying, hey, that's a really great question, to at least one of your questions, to some degree, that means in life they're not being asked those types of questions, not in an aha, got you type way, but in a, hey, let's unpack this so we can all learn and grow together. So for me, Ryan, it's more like stepping stones. It's to say that I think I show up best in a conversation without a script, just trying to genuinely learn about somebody and trying to understand how to create value for the audience, for the listener. So that's how I run the podcast. I do solo episodes once in a while, and I think that's something that I will grow towards over time, and I will have more structured, episodes in the future. It's not a vertical I'm looking to optimize today, because I really want to chart out what that path is. I have a school community where I have solo videos that's just, pure education. And I think, Ryan, it also kind of comes down to like, what is the goal of the podcast, right? We talked about Patrick Bet David. We talked about where it was from value entertainment to maybe where it is now, maybe more entertainment. For me, I don't want to be at a point where I'm selling like my podcast, my IP. I don't want to be at a point where I'm just entertaining people. I want to stay in that lane of just financial literacy and providing as much value for people as possible, even if that means my click-through rates are low, even if that means my watch times are low. I'm not prioritizing monetizing the channel. I'm prioritizing creating a long-term value for people. So that's kind of how I have it structured right now, while recognizing there's always room to improve.
And this is really important to note for any business owner, no matter what, in whatever capacity you're in. If you do something like this, like a podcast, right, or even a YouTube channel, it has to be for you first. Here's the reason why. You can hire somebody to market your business for your business. You can hire somebody to write posts on your behalf, but for your business, right? You can hire somebody to run ads on your behalf, but for your business. But if and when you are looking at the camera, or you're doing an interview like this where I'm looking at Mustafa on the other side, I have to want to do this, or else it's going to be so bad. And then here's the other problem. Everybody can feel that, right? And we've experienced this, right? We've helped launch so many podcasts where we suggested with the client what they should do, because that's our job. We literally are consultants for podcasts, right? For businesses. But at least where my mindset has shifted, or where my thought process has moved to, is what do you want to do? Which I think is what we did a lot of when we, worked together. You're a previous client, and now you're off with your podcast, which is exactly what our goal is, right? Go and do it. But we worked on that a lot of like, what is this? I bet you thought about that. Do I want to interview people? Maybe I'm not the guy in front of the camera like rah rah Gary Vee, right? But can I ask pointed questions and intuitive questions and listen? Okay. Yes, I like that better. So yeah, a little bit of a ramble there, but would you agree that the format of the podcast, or even the podcast itself, is very dependent on who you are as a person versus whatever business result you're trying to look for?
I think this is the problem, Ryan, to be honest with you. A lot of times, like, I run my own business, I'm blessed to be in a good position. I do well for my clients. I've made them over $20 million passively in real estate. And sometimes an individual can find them stuck in, like, how am I going to grow the business? Like, I on my podcast, I've interviewed different fund managers. It's very rare. I don't typically interview those types of people, but I have in the past. And part of the conversation offline is, hey, my marketing team is telling me to launch a podcast. And I'm like, great. Do you like talking to people in this format? No, not really. Do you have a clear monetization strategy? No, not really. Do you want to think about having a clear monetization strategy? No, not really. Do not launch a podcast. Like, for me, with my podcast, there's no monetization strategy per se, right? If it happens, it happens. It hasn't happened yet. And I'm not optimizing for that, because it's, hey, the podcast will be successful in 10 years. Hey, I'm looking to help people with financial literacy. It's very hard to quantify how you help people with financial literacy, right? I can talk to the guy who I helped buy a house, even though that's not what I do at all, right? I can talk to the guy who I helped connect them with a tax strategist, even though I don't make money on that introduction, right? So financial literacy, and like what I do sometimes, it's not about a short-term transaction or making money from my network or anything like that. It's about creating lasting value, which is the point of my Fin journey. It's the point of the company, one of the companies that I run. It's very education heavy without, a big price tag. It's free. And so for me, Ryan, when I'm talking to people, when I'm ideating or thinking about the podcast, even with you, it's like, hey, I'm thinking about the podcast. Why should I go with podcast principles? And even that decision was probably like, I decided, and then I pulled the trigger a year later or 6 months later. And I think we had conversations about it, like why you versus some other company, etc. And ultimately, for me, it comes back to what I was saying before about like buying time and figuring out who's the right team to kind of help you launch, to kind of uncover the gaps. Like for what I do, professionally, I set up passive real estate investment options for people. They come to me with like a clear guideline of what they should do. And I'm asking simple questions like why, to understand better, to then conclude that what they thought they should do, they should probably not do. And I'm sure that happens in podcasting with clients that you work with, Ryan. I'm sure that it happens to you, the listener, with any vertical, where people come to you with a preconceived notion. I had this earlier today, where somebody was thinking that they need to be a real estate agent to get rep status to be able to offset their taxes. And they're leaving a $250K plus job to become a real estate agent. And I'm looking at it like, honestly, don't become a real estate agent. Like, do what you want to do. I support you. I'm a resource for you. But you're not going to make that much money. It's going to be like soul-sucking work probably. You're going to bang your head against the wall. You're doing this to create more freedom for you, but you'll actually have less freedom, especially if you want to get to those numbers, you should consider doing this instead. And I introduce something else. And the point of that, Ryan, is not to say that like my way is the right way. Like even in our conversations when we were launching the podcast, at no point did you or Jack say, hey, this is the one way to do it. But a lot of it is like dispelling misconceptions. Sometimes when you see somebody on the podcast with a beautiful background, you know, good audio, good visual, etc., it kind of looks and feels easy, but it's a skill like anything. And a skill takes 3 to 7 years to really master. So you want to give yourself that time to get really good at it. And then if you want to monetize, by all means. But I'm very big on product-led growth. So it's build the best product first and then focus on marketing and focus on monetizing, etc.
Yeah, I just want to let that marinate for a second. What you just said, it's really important. A few things. I think back to the beginning of what you said is I think people wildly underestimate the audience they currently have, and they wildly overestimate the audience they don't. And that's, I mean, let's look at it like this. Over the course of your lifetime in business, right, you may be able to help, just in terms of clientele, I don't know, hundreds, thousands, maybe. But why, when you have an audience of hundreds or thousands, that's not enough, right? So that's what and that's what you're saying, and that's what I explain to business owners. This is what we said before we jumped on. This type of stuff is not appealing to hundreds of thousands or millions of people. It's not. Now, my competitors will go out there and tell you how cool your idea is, how great it's going to be, and buy the $25,000 studio, and we will run ads, and and if we don't get views, we'll bot them, and we'll buy them, and we'll buy ads to get the views, and we'll make it look legit, right? And I'm saying this because this is what happens. Like, I'm not making any of this up. This is all what my competitors actually do, and that's fine. That's what they do. I'm not saying it's wrong. My philosophy is start with what you have. Get X amount of those people, to your point, create a good product. The product is the podcast, in this case. And then you see how many of them actually agree with you that it's good. I would rather start with that real numbers than go, oh, we need to make, it just needs to be big. But that's what everybody does. Because they want their podcast or their content, it's typically not a podcast, right? It's an Instagram post, a LinkedIn post, whatever, to match their ego as to where they are in business. Well, I have 30 years in business, so I should get 1 million followers. It's actually the opposite. The people with the least amount of years have the most followers because they focus on is how to get followers, right? Hey, man, if every follower was $1, I'd have a lot more dollars right now. It's just not how it works. So appreciate that. Because that's a really good way to think about it. And the way that I told my client the other day when we set up his studio, he dropped, $6,000 on a studio, which he does well for himself. But I said to him, treat this like a business. I know this is fun for you. I know you're going to tell your story. I know you have a story to tell. I know you have a mission. Same with me, same with you. But treat it like a business, not like, and we did get a lot of views, but we can't let the ego run it. We got to let the business run it, right? Anything else on that side of it that you think we should touch on before we keep going? I
think it's one of those things that we live in an era of social media where it feels like likes, interactions, engagement, subscriptions, all these different things are the most important thing, but none of that pays bills. So it's important, like, if we're going to run it like a business, like Ryan said, it's important to think through, like, what type of business are you aiming for? And really build it very intentionally. And to me, a lot of that starts with, like, clarity of yourself. Like, you need to know yourself. You need to know your strengths and weaknesses. No coach, no person selling you a product can answer these questions for you. They can only pose the question, which, Ryan is good at. That helps you uncover maybe the pillars that you want to talk through. And then that helps you form like your subconscious or central thesis around the podcast of what you're going to uncover. And then ultimately later down the line, you could have an expensive product or a cheap product that you could sell. And there's going to be different strategies around it. But for me, like, I approach it very product-led growth. Other people are going to approach it like from a marketing heavy perspective. Ultimately, what matters is what you think, and building in a way that is in alignment with you, because you're going to show up with a lot more energy. You're going to have higher conversion. Ultimately, you're going to sell better, which to some degree is the point of a business, to generate revenue.
Yeah, no, exactly. And you find that, once you're in business long enough too, you find that if the business doesn't match you and your personality, then you hate the business, you resent the business, you don't want to grow it, you resent the people, you start resenting everything because it didn't match. That's what happened to me, right? I hired a business coach. I did podcast coaching for years and years and helped all these people with their content. And then I'm like, what am I doing? I'm like, what am I doing? Why am I doing it? Right?
Yeah.
And to your question, the coaches posed the right questions that made me uncomfortable. I answered them, right? And now I'm in a position where I don't need that coaching. I did it. Now I'm more so what's happening right now. Where are we forecasting out? How are we growing? Diving into the niche, right? Things that you do after you figure out, okay, no, I'm in the right spot, but I need to make sure my day-to-day is designed for what I'm meant to do. And in my case and in your case, part of that day-to-day is podcasting, because that's what we're designed to do, because we figured out the podcast that works for us. So that's great. I love it. That's really important. A equally as important topic, this is equally as important to how many views you get, is how you manage that content. You have a great team for your podcast, for your business, right? Can you talk about how do you manage? Let's start with this. How many podcasts do you do every month? And then how does that all get managed? Where, are you editing? Is somebody else editing? Are they uploading? Talk about, the behind the scenes, because it doesn't seem exciting until you're editing at 11:30 at night.
Good question, Ryan. So I'm proud to say, when you ask the question, I'm thinking I have no idea, right? And that's how I wanted it set up from day one. I wanted it so that I didn't have to think about anything, because I'm coming from a place of I don't have the time. So let me make the time. Let me get Ryan's team involved. Let me build a team that Ryan's team can train, and let it be on autopilot. So in theory, Ryan, my days are packed back to back with like client meetings and things of that nature. So I needed to find time to record and allocate, let's say, an hour. So initially I had like 2 meetings a week, let's say. And then people reschedule or things don't work out. And then you're like, hey, I'm not recording enough. No problem. Let me drop in a solo episode. So I have like 1 solo episode and 1 week that I missed. The week that I missed, I'm very upset about. The solo episode, I was like less upset about it. Like it had to get done just to keep the cadence of showing up every week. Because I know for myself, Ryan, if I don't have that weekly cadence, then like the podcast will die very quickly, because I'll be busy with something that is much higher priority for me than the podcast, because there's just so many competing priorities in life. And that's how I want to be running my business. I want to be very busy all the time doing things that I love. So that's all like the subtext, right? I have one guy who manages everything. Now, what he does day to day, I don't even track, nor do I want to track it, right? I have like other people that help him when he needs help, but by and large, he does everything. When there are issues, I'm identifying them and fixing them. Like my calendar now, I have it set to only take 3 podcast recordings per week versus 2. So that way I have more buffer time. Because in my mind, I want 6 weeks of content already recorded ahead of time. 8 weeks of content already recorded ahead of time, already edited, ready to drop. I have not hit that point yet. And I'm okay with that. It is what it is. The most important thing is to not miss an episode that drops every week. So that, we're doing very well over the last, let's say, 8 months. Maybe there was 2 weeks. 1 week where I dropped a solo episode and 1 week where I missed an episode. So I'm happy about that, because it's not just about like the cadence with it, which is what we're talking about right now. It's also about like the quality, like the guest quality, everything, like how I show up, etc. All of that is very important for me, for the podcast, right? It's really product-led growth, have the best product out there, etc. So I have one guy that does it along the way. I pay for different like courses for him to take to upskill himself on like, creating better thumbnails, creating better SEO, all of these different things. He's in charge of tracking the metrics of how many people are subscribing to the channel, how many people are liking, all of these different things that I know are important. but I don't want to get into the nitty gritty because I didn't build my podcast to generate revenue. So I didn't build my like Ryan is saying, hey, this is a business. I'm saying, oh, fine, it's a business, but I don't want to make money. So if I don't want to make money on the business, I need to build the business in a way that it doesn't take too much time, because that takes away from other activities that I do monetize off of. I don't monetize off the podcast, so I need to figure out a way to build the podcast so it doesn't take too much of my time, if that makes sense, Ryan.
Well, that makes sense, but it is a business in the sense of the listeners pay with their time.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
They are exchanging something that is more valuable than money, which is an hour of their time.
Agreed. It's really valuable. And that's why I want to create a lot of value for the listener. And I can check that by watch times. But I don't want to have like a strong call to action or ads or something in the middle of my episodes, especially right now, to monetize more directly. The way I'm monetizing right now, or it's the way that the exchange is happening, is that they're investing their time, which I really value. In some future state, there'll be a newsletter. There'll be other verticals to kind of help people grow. But the point is not to be a podcaster who's making like $1 million in revenue from like Google, YouTube ads, or sponsorship times on my account.
That game though, man, like it sucks. Like it meaning like here's the thing: you can call it a sponsor if you want to. It's fine. That's a client. If somebody hands you money and says, do what I want you to do, sponsor sounds cool, but that's called a client. So why start a different business? That's my whole thing. This podcast does make you money. We just can't look at you. YouTube doesn't just give, it's just YouTube isn't giving you the money, right? If it's helping you and then helping others, it's making money somewhere, right? Maybe not today, but next year, the following year, right? Long form is long term, right? So,
and to add to that, Ryan, it's really like the social credibility piece, right?
Yes.
When people are listening to you day in, day out, or even once in a while, when they're seeing your content in front of them, what sometimes you forget is you're consuming a lot of content online. You're aware of a lot of content creators. Most people don't have a content creator in their circle. And I'll give an example from like LinkedIn as well. I have a very strong following on LinkedIn. When I initially started getting to those like higher follower type numbers, everybody I would talk to on the weekends would be talking to me about my LinkedIn. And like I mentioned about like YouTube and podcasting, I'm very uncomfortable when people do that. So they're talking to me about some post and I'm thinking I post 5 times a week. I have no idea what you're referring to. Let me build the conversation to figure out what you're saying. And to Ryan's point, these people, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's podcasting, let's focus on podcasting. On podcasting, when people are listening to your content, they're investing time, they're getting to know, like, and trust you. If you have another product that you sell, that you monetize off of more directly, etc., it will make that conversion process much easier because there will be so much more social proof around what you do and around you as a person. That's not why I created my podcast, but it's kind of important to recognize that, like for me, if the goal is financial literacy, it's to say the most important thing is to figure out what skills you're going to invest time in, develop those skills to a degree that you can create a lot of value for people and monetize off of those skills. If my skill was having an amazing camera or having an amazing background or being able to speak well, all of those individual skills have value. But when you talent stack, when you put all those skills together, then it's so much easier to monetize. And to some degree, living in America, like we just think about monetizing, we're a very capitalistic society. I think the easiest way to monetize is to talent stack, to be good at a couple different things and put that all together to then create a product that is more valued in the marketplace. And podcasting can really help with that.
Yeah, I mean, no, that alone is a reason to do it, is enough reason to do it, in my opinion. But I've been shifting from ifs to when, right? So okay. I've been trying to check myself on that. When, because this was what happened to me, so when somebody says, hey, we have an opening for a keynote here, we don't really mind, Mustafa, we know who you are, We know what you talk about in your podcast and your LinkedIn. 20 minutes on stage. Basically, whatever you want it to be, just let us know. Put it together. We'll just review it, and then that's going to happen. So imagine you have 100 hours of a podcast or you don't. Well, if you do, you're that much more prepared for, hey, we want you to be on guest on our podcast. Hey, we have a keynote that we want you to go to. Hey, we want you to run this workshop at this event. Hey, we want you to speak in front of other real estate investors. They all do what you do, but none of them do a podcast. Now you're the one teaching the thing that you just did only for 1 year. But you're an expert now.
And it's really powerful, Ryan, just to build on that. Let's say you are good at real estate. Let's say you're a real estate agent in that example. Or let's say you do what I do, right? You manage money professionally and you make people money professionally. If no one knows who you are, it doesn't matter how good your product is, you can't help more people. And for somebody like me, that's really annoying. It's a really annoying conclusion because that means that you do need to invest in time in marketing. That means marketing is important. But what's more important is to understand how you want to show up, right? So for me, I get invited to speak at different things and I feel honored. I get invited to my local college. I went to Rutgers University. I get invited to speak there and I feel honored and privileged. And when I get up there to some degree, I'm sure there are people who are doing more in life than I'm doing, but they're not on stage. And they're not on stage probably because they have less of a social media presence, that people don't know what they're doing. And I can respect that because I'm also a private person and I prefer to be a private person. But if my goal at this point in my life is just to help people grow, then I need to be positioned for people to reach out to me. And that means I need a public persona versus maybe the individual who has different goals and doesn't need a public persona. But now when I'm on stage talking to somebody at Rutgers University, it's like, hey, this guy has made it. Even if I haven't, you have now more social credibility than somebody else. And you're able to leverage that social credibility to grow your business even further. So it's one of those things that it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Ryan talked about transitioning from if to when. It's a very small thing, but say, hey, if I start a podcast, don't say that. Say, I will start a podcast in the next 100 years. You're now going to be a podcaster in the next 100 years. You and I probably won't be around in 100 years. But now already subconsciously,
hey man, speak for yourself.
Things have changed.
Okay, maybe I will be.
Ryan
you
is
don't
beautiful.
know that.
He'll be around. You're right. I apologize. Ryan likes to be a bit edgy.
No man, if I can't walk though, I'm good. Take me out.
Not if, when you can't walk.
When
you can't walk.
When I can't walk. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
The point is our mind is very powerful. We're able to accomplish a lot, but sometimes we set ourselves up for failure by saying, hey, I won't be able to do that, instead of saying, hey, how can I?
Yes. And on that note, we've covered this deep on this podcast and our content and everywhere, which is when I started this 8 years ago, it was cheap to do this then. It's even cheaper now. When I started,
especially with inflation.
That's what you cover, okay? You cover that side. I'll cover this side. But I had I was actually in a pretty good spot because I was working a lot, right? But I was a mechanic, right? But there was multiple times when I had $200, $300. That's all I had, right? I still had a podcast. It's not expensive to do. It doesn't take a lot of time if you set it up for it not to take a lot of time. And even if you set it up like that, still not that expensive, right? I'm still spending less than $1,500 a month on all marketing, meaning editing, thumbnails, all of it, probably $1,000 or less for an entire agency, right? It's not about that, but that's what people will do is they will find a way for it to be too expensive, too much time, not the right time, not fine. I'm with that. That's fine. I don't mind if you have the excuses. You're not ready though. Until you're ready, you decided it's happened to me, it's happened to you. You decided one day you were ready. It was different, wasn't any different than the day before. Just the one day you decided.
Do you mind if I elaborate on why I decided, Ryan, in my journey?
That would be great.
Yeah. So for me, I got to a point where it's kind of like a put up or shut up type moment, Ryan, where I'd talked to you, I talked to maybe one other person, and I'd narrowed it down of the thousands of people that do this, or hundreds of thousands, however many there are. I narrowed it down to two people. And I think both people had good follow up, which obviously I appreciated because otherwise I would forget, because this is something that I wanted to do, but I didn't want to do it today. I wanted to do it 5 years from now, eventually. I wanted to have a podcast because it's one of the verticals that I wanted to help educate people from. And I still have many different verticals on my list that I just haven't gotten to yet. And it came to a point where it's like, hey, we just have to get started. And the next step for me to get started is for me to feel uncomfortable or to feel like I'm wasting money. So I had to figure out how to motivate myself. And the best way to motivate me is just to make it a situation where I've paid for something and I feel like I'm wasting money. Then I'll now move down that sales ladder. I'll now start taking action because I don't want to be wasting money. I find it, reckless. Literally, I run a financial literacy platform, right? You can't be wasting money. It's kind of like one of the core tenets. So for me, Ryan, that's kind of how I position myself to make it happen. And I say that because everyone has different rate limiting steps. For some people, they don't have the money. Some people, they don't have the time. There's always going to be a challenge. But if it's something that you genuinely want to do, you need to figure out a way to kind of outsmart yourself, right? Like in this situation, I would have procrastinated indefinitely. I wanted to launch that newsletter same time I wanted to launch the podcast. It's now been over a year. I don't have that newsletter, right? And it's like, that's the next vertical that I'll work on eventually as I build out the team in the right way. So I think for somebody who's sitting on the sidelines, who's consuming a lot of content, or who's very good at what they do, because those are two different people, right? The person consuming a lot of content probably has a lot of free time. Transition from consuming content to teaching the person 2 steps behind you about the content you're consuming. And you don't even have to post it. Just start taking videos. Just start taking 1 or 2 actions. Reach out to Ryan, reach out to somebody on his team to really understand what the strategy of podcasting would look like, because it's one of those things that you don't know what you don't know. There are an infinite number of ways to like learn and grow. Podcasting is going to be really valuable not only for your audience, but also for you. And you have to have some sort of like push to get into it to then see the benefits later, right? Now I'm in that position where I see those benefits. And there's so many different ways that it helps. We talked about speaking on stage, etc. For you, it's going to be the same. When you start, it'll be initial grind. It'll be challenging initially, just like learning any new skill. But then eventually that success becomes inevitable.
So you ended up hiring podcast principals for help with your podcast. Why did you hire somebody to help you?
Because I don't think I had the time to figure it out myself. If I did have the time to figure it out myself, it would have taken me maybe 3 to 5 years to learn what Ryan was already very good at. I was already not prioritizing it. It's not that I wasn't prioritizing it. I wasn't seeing results from my efforts because I wasn't allocating enough time to it because I just didn't have the time. So I think it's one of those things that on social media today, like the solopreneur is glorified. And I don't know why. Maybe that guy has a team.
I don't know why either, by the way. I'm not with that.
Maybe that guy has a team.
We could, on the outside, it seems, I know why. The reason why is because of what it seems like on the outside. Anyway.
So it's a marketing game. Let's just say being a solopreneur is a lie. That's a marketing game. Anybody making $1 million plus in revenue, in bottom line profit. Anyone who's making $1 million a year or more is probably not a solopreneur. And maybe I'm wrong. And if I'm wrong,
there are exceptions, but the exceptions don't define the rule.
Exactly. So let's build on it, right? There's this guy. He's a solopreneur, meaning it's only him and his business, and he's making $1 million or more after all of expenses paid, whatever. On his taxes, that's what he's reporting. Like, I'm being that clear, right? That guy has made it in theory, and we're happy for him. But if you're that good, you just want to keep growing. You want to build a team. You're not that good and then saying, oh, hey, I don't work more than 1 hour a day. I work 4-hour work week, etc. That's not happening. Nope. Most likely. And if it is happening, reach out to me and I will personally apologize to you. But that person who's a solopreneur, sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're projecting that image and they have a team of virtual assistants. That means they run a company. They're not a solopreneur. But no problem. You can position yourself however you want. For me, the idea was that I wanted to build a team, Ryan. But the best way for me to build my team was for me to hire somebody that's very good at what they do and have them train my team, which is what I did, right? I hired you, and then I hired other people, and I had you train other people. And there was a seamless handoff where I don't even know what goes on, right? Sometimes there's a question about password or RSS or whatever, like, Captivate, whatever's going on. I have no idea. I don't know how much I pay. I don't know if it's a yearly subscription. I don't know. I get a bill every so often and I'm checking the bills. I'm like, I don't know what this is for. Let me highlight it and give it to somebody to look at. I want to be very ignorant about these things because if I was more involved in it, I would have to drive to monetize off of it. Very simply. I can't allocate too much time to this and not enough time to other activities that are monetizing that maybe create more of an immediate, return for people. Right? I don't want to be in a position where I'm some guru selling a $10,000 course, etc. That's not the vertical that I want to be in. I want to be in, hey, if you work with me, you're investing passively and we're making you a lot of money. Right? I work with over 291 investors. I've made them over $20 million in distributions. That's not their net worth going up or anything like that. That's actual money they've made. I can quantify that. When I help people with soft things like mindset that helps them make more money, or help them get a house, or help them save on taxes, all of these different things I do on the side, I'm not monetizing off of any of that. It's to genuinely help people where they're at. With the podcast, right, it was very intentional, and I mentioned it a couple times, to build it so that it doesn't require my time, so that in some future state, when I do monetize off of it, I can just pay that guy more money. That guy's building the podcast for me. I'm the face of it. It's my vision that he's helping implement. But the point was, Ryan, to build a microfinance strategy to say, hey, how do you take people that maybe are not making that much money? How do you build jobs around them? And how do you scale those verticals to create businesses around them, to hire more people, to help more people? And that's really the goal for me. Like my Fin journey is all about people's financial journey. Along the way, I want to be hiring people and upskilling them and getting them to a point where they live very comfortable lives financially. So they can, work and kill for the job if they want, but they can also coast if they want. And I'm just judging it by performance. Like, what is that output?
Perfect. So tell people what My Fin Journey is, but actually a better way to put it, who is meant for this podcast, for your podcast, right? Like, who is that person? What position are they in where they listen to your podcast and they really get the most out of it?
That's a great question, Ryan. So in terms of people that we invite to the podcast, they're typically people that are in executive positions or running their own company. They're typically very good at what they do, and they're typically talking about their journey. And along the way, we're drawing parallels between their journey and how it is reflected in like personal financial decisions, etc. So it's not, the guest isn't somebody who's worth $1 million or more. The guest is somebody who you can learn from. And that's really powerful. Like I've had people on the podcast, Ryan, that are talking about like the health and wellness of their marital relationship. Like I know we were talking about how you just got engaged. Congratulations as well. I don't know if it's supposed to be public knowledge, but
I'll say this here. I milked that on LinkedIn. Come on.
Right? So it's like, imagine, Ryan, you're talking to somebody who is like a relationship expert and they're saying, hey, if your relationship sucks, your work is going to be affected. Fine. When you hear it, you don't have an issue with that. But if they unpack it several layers deep to how badly it can impact your business.
Which is how people actually end up learning things, is if it resonates with their particular situation.
Exactly.
So you have to go deeper. I just want to make a note of that.
No, I think it's a great point to double tap on. You have to go deeper because sometimes when people say things at a surface level, you and I don't have the context to know what it actually means. That's the point of the podcast.
Yes.
The point of the podcast is to interview people like that so that people who are good at what they do, somebody who could also be on the podcast, can walk away learning and growing. So imagine you're 25 to 45. You're looking to learn and grow. You're looking to make more money and you don't know how. and you stumble on my podcast, not because I have amazing marketing or anything like that, because you're one of the 291 investors that work with me or whatever it is. You just fortuitously run into my podcast and you're like, hey, this is really interesting. Let me watch the whole episode. Why is he interviewing an athlete? Why is he interviewing an athlete that didn't make it pro but made it to like college football? And why is that guy now running an investment firm? Okay. Why is he interviewing somebody, like I said, about relationships or about AI or any of these different verticals that are seemingly unrelated, maybe a dentist, etc.? The point is to say that it doesn't matter what you do, you can make money. What matters is to understand how people think about adversity and how people overcome it, because everyone deals with adversity. But me saying everyone deals with adversity is not as powerful as saying, hey, I grew up with no money, this was my condition, and now I'm killing it. Or, hey, I grew up with no money and now I'm comfortable, right? So the point of the podcast is really to build that railroad, so to speak, that people can traverse to ultimately say, hey, this is how I'm going to make money. And if they make money and if they need help like investing it, I run a real estate investment firm. But I don't talk about that on the podcast. I talk about financial literacy. I talk about what I perceive.
Because that's not the point of the podcast, right?
Exactly.
If you never mention it, I think that's a disservice. If you only mention it, then that's a disservice. It is a bit of a delicate dance because you do want people to know what you do, but that's not the reason why they're there.
Exactly. And sometimes those conversations are more offline. Sometimes they're online, right? Sometimes somebody will mention, hey, I invest in real estate. So on the podcast, I'll ask, okay, like, what do you invest in? Why do you invest in? And then throughout that conversation, you can say, oh, hey, like, why is Mustafa asking this type of due diligence, this type of background check question versus what I would have been thinking? So the point of the podcast is really to educate people, just like before the podcast, you and I were talking, and we're talking about how you improve your background. And it can be the guy who buys everything in one go or the guy that does like 1% improvements. Yep. And the point is to bring that on camera, to say, hey, sometimes, again, I come from an imposter syndrome kind of background, right? So sometimes the best way for me to create value for people is just to talk to them, and then they will tell me what they value. And then I will know for future conversations what people valued, so I will mention it. And that's why I mention a lot of the imposter syndrome throughout the episode, because it's important to know your weaknesses and to get your weaknesses to a point where it doesn't stop your aggressive growth, because you will grow. But people have like a 0 to 100 mentality. Only focus on your strengths, only focus on your weaknesses. I'm more in the middle, which can feel non-committal. But the point is your strengths are what will help you monetize and create a lot of value in the market. But your weaknesses, if you never address them, they will stop you from aggressively growing. And they'll be like little glass ceilings that you have to break through.
Love it. Dropping bombs here, man. I feel like Brad Lee, dude. Last question, the question before the real last question that I ask everybody. You've had a podcast for a little over a year now. Was it worth it?
It's a good question. I don't pause for dramatic effect. I pause because I want to say yes and no. Was it worth it? No. Will it be worth it? Yes. When will it be worth it? Eventually. I think fundamentally I'm on my podcasting journey. My staff, my team tells me
on your MyFin journey is
exactly
their financial journey is your podcast journey.
Sure. In one way, yes. The thing is, sometimes it's like, was it worth it means like, hey, this is the end point, this is the finish line, and you're judging your past success over the last year. For me, I'm like, I'm still running my race.
I would say, well, I think more it's was it just worth it to do it? Do you feel like you're a better person in a better place with a better business, with better content, or at least the same or better than you were without a podcast?
I feel like I should say yes. I feel like I also
have
very high
it's good you're being honest.
So my answer is kind of going to be like, yeah. And that's why for me the answer is no, right? There's always, I look at it from a product-led growth perspective. There's so much more that I could be doing.
So you're saying the future potential of it is going to be worth it. But okay, no, I'm with that. I like that. I like that. Everybody answers this question a little bit different, but you know who our typical clients are. and you know how they talk and act, and they're very much, let's go, let's work out. You know, like it's all like everything's
they're very
positive.
alpha. Like,
Yeah, not me. I'm very not beta for sure.
Me too.
Depends.
Me too. What's
I
your
don't
last
know.
question? Hit me.
Yeah, where do we find My Fin Journey? Where do we find you? Where do we follow you? Plug it all.
Sure. So you can find me on LinkedIn. It's Mustafa Ladda. I'm sure all the links will be in the show notes. On YouTube and on Spotify and on podcasts, you can find me at My Fin Journey. And those are going to be the ways to reach out to me if you're looking to have a conversation with somebody from like a perspective of no judgment, somebody who's genuinely looking to help you wherever you are at. Reach out to me. It doesn't have to be on investing. It can just be on financial literacy. It can be on, growing your business and scaling. Ultimately, I try to help everyone that I speak to.
Yeah, you're one of my favorite people to talk to, man. One of our favorite podcasts as well to work on. Just in building it, it was a lot of fun working with your team, which we don't do every day.
And I'll add, man. Like I was a very bad client from my perspective, right? Like I would just ghost Ryan and I would just be like, I'll get back to you later.
Client. You're a client, dude. Clients are busy. Podcasting is not your life. It's a thing that you do. That's how it works. You don't wake up and go to bed thinking about it. Some people do. It depends on the day, but you're mostly waking up and thinking about your business, right? So that's why we make it possible for you to obsess over that, so you don't have to obsess over the podcast. So
which is very helpful.
Yes, that's the goal of Podcast Principles. On that note, thank you so much, Mustafa, for doing this. Appreciate you being here, my friend.
No problem. We'll speak soon. Have a good one, guys.
Yes, and before we get out of here officially, if you're not there yet, if you're saying, I want to do a podcast. I listen to the episode, I watch stuff, I listen to clips, but I'm not there yet. We have the solution for that. It's called Script Science. It's going to be in the description or the show notes or the comment section of this content right here. You download it, and it gives you 20 different podcast episode ideas, so you don't have to stare at a blank page. Script Science, go download it right now. And that is it. We'll see you next week.